In the quiet village of Umudara, a young widow was forced to prove her innocence in the most terrifying way imaginable.
You must
The
drink the water
villagers
from your
said she had
husband's
murdered
corpse.
her husband, the same man who had spent his entire life helping them. They demanded she shave her hair, drink water from her husband's corpse,
Thank you, Chief.
and
God
swear before the ancient shrine. But the widow refused, not because she was guilty, but because she carried a secret the entire village would one day regret. A child who would return years later to make the whole village pay.
Welcome to TalesByNnamdi. Subscribe, like, and comment as we journey through another episode.
Long before tragedy visited the quiet village of Umudara, life moved slowly and peacefully beneath the tall palm trees that surrounded the land. The mornings in Umudara always began the same way. Roosters crowed loudly from different corners of the village. Women swept their compounds with long brooms made from dry palm fronds. The smell of wood fire floated through the cool morning air as mothers prepared food for their families. Children ran barefoot across the red earth roads, laughing loudly as they chased old bicycle tires with sticks. It was a simple life. But in that village, one name was spoken with a level of respect that almost sounded like worship. Chief Nnamdi Okoye. To the people of Umudara, he was more than just a wealthy man. He was their pride, their protector, their miracle. Although he lived in the busy city of Port Harcourt, he never forgot the village where he was born. Every few months, the sound of heavy truck engines would echo through the dusty road that led into Umudara. And immediately the children would begin shouting with excitement, "Chief Nnamdi has come. Chief Nnamdi has come." The trucks were always filled with supplies, bags of rice, cartons of medicine, school books, roofing sheets, sometimes even generators. And when the convoy finally stopped in the village square, Chief Nnamdi would step out of his black SUV wearing a simple smile that made him look less like a billionaire businessman and more like a humble farmer. Villagers would gather around him with gratitude shining in their eyes. Some would kneel, some would bless him, some would even cry, because without him, many of them would have had nothing. It was Chief Nnamdi who built the village's first health center after several pregnant women died during childbirth. It was Chief Nnamdi who drilled the first borehole, saving the villagers from walking miles to the dirty river for water. And it was Chief Nnamdi who rebuilt the old primary school, giving hundreds of village children the chance to learn. Whenever the elders spoke about him, they would shake their heads in amazement. "God truly blessed that boy," they would say. But despite all the wealth and admiration surrounding his life, there was one quiet sorrow that followed Chief Nnamdi everywhere he went. His marriage had no child. His wife, Amaka Okoye, was a calm and gentle woman. Unlike her husband, Amaka rarely visited Umudara, not because she hated the village, but because she always felt uncomfortable with the traditional beliefs that controlled the people there. Amaka was a deeply devoted Christian. Her faith meant everything to her. She spent hours reading her Bible, praying, and helping people quietly without seeking praise. But the villagers had their own beliefs. And in Umudara, people believed that a marriage without children was never ordinary. It meant something was wrong. Sometimes they whispered about it. Sometimes they blamed Amaka. She must have angered the gods. A woman that cannot give birth brings misfortune. Maybe Chief Nnamdi married the wrong woman. But Chief Nnamdi never allowed such talk near his home. Whenever anyone tried to suggest that his wife was the problem, he would immediately shut them down. "One good wife is worth more than 10 children, he once told an elder firmly. Those words spread through the village and silenced many mouths. Because everyone knew one thing about Chief Nnamdi. He loved his wife deeply. 8 years of marriage had passed. Still, no child. But their love never changed. In the city of Port Harcourt, their life was comfortable and peaceful. Their house stood inside a quiet gated estate. Tall white walls, wide glass windows, a beautiful garden. Inside the house, laughter still lived between them. On most evenings, after returning from his business meetings, Chief Nnamdi would sit on the balcony with Amaka while the sun slowly disappeared behind the buildings of Port Harcourt. They would drink tea and talk about the future, sometimes about the village, sometimes about adopting a child, but always with hope. One evening, as rain clouds gathered in the sky, Amaka walked into the living room holding a small white envelope. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes looked confused and emotional. "Nnamdi," she called softly. He looked up from his laptop. "What is it?" For a moment she said nothing. Then slowly, she handed him the envelope. Inside it was a medical report. He scanned the page quickly. Then suddenly his eyes widened. His breathing stopped. "Amaka, is this real?" Tears rolled down her face as she nodded slowly. Yes. After 8 long years, Amaka was pregnant. Chief Nnamdi stood up immediately and pulled her into his arms so tightly that she began laughing through her tears. For the first time in years, their home was filled with a level of joy that words could not explain. That night, they talked endlessly about their future child. They talked about names. They talked about schools. They talked about the day they would finally carry their baby to Umudara village. But life can be cruel in ways nobody expects. 2 weeks later, Chief Nnamdi attended a late business meeting in Port Harcourt. It ended close to midnight. The rain had started falling heavily across the city. His driver had already gone home earlier that evening, so he decided to drive himself. The roads were quiet. Streetlights reflected on the wet asphalt. As he drove through the empty highway, he suddenly felt a strange tightness inside his chest. At first, he ignored it. But within seconds, the pain became unbearable. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. His breathing became difficult. Sweat covered his forehead. Chief Nnamdi was having a massive heart attack. His vision blurred. The car began to drift slowly across the road. Then suddenly, the vehicle crashed violently into a roadside barrier. By the time passers-by rushed to the scene, Chief Amaka Okoye was already dead. The news of his death traveled like wildfire. First through Port Harcourt, then across the villages, then finally into Umudara. And when the villagers heard that the man who carried their hopes had died suddenly, the entire village fell into mourning. But as grief spread through the land, something darker slowly began growing beneath the surface: suspicion. And unfortunately, all the fingers were pointing at only one person: Amaka Okoye. The wife who was carrying a secret nobody in the village knew. A secret growing quietly inside her womb. The only child of the man they had just buried. And the very child whose existence could have changed everything. But the villagers had already started asking dangerous questions. How can a healthy man die so suddenly? Who was the last person with him? What if someone wanted his wealth? And soon, those whispers would become accusations. Accusations that would destroy a woman's life and start a chain of events that would lead to blood. 28 years later, the journey from the city of Port Harcourt to the quiet village of Umudara took several hours. But on that day, the road felt heavier than it had ever felt before. Inside a long, black hearse vehicle lay the lifeless body of the man the villagers had once called their greatest blessing, Chief Nnamdi Okoye. Behind the hearse, several cars followed slowly, carrying relatives, close friends, and community members who had traveled from the city to attend the burial. Amaka sat silently in the back seat of one of the vehicles. Her eyes were swollen from days of crying. Her hands rested gently on her stomach, though nobody noticed the small protective gesture she kept making unconsciously. 8 weeks. That was how long the new life inside her had been growing. But now the father of that child was gone forever. The convoy eventually reached Umudara late in the afternoon. As the vehicles entered the dusty road that led into the village square, the entire community had already gathered there. Women began wailing loudly the moment the hearse appeared. Men removed their caps and bowed their heads in respect. Some elderly villagers began chanting traditional mourning songs. Chief Nnamdi's body was carried carefully out of the hearse and placed inside the large compound of his ancestral home. The atmosphere was heavy with sorrow. Men who had once laughed with him now cried openly. Women sat on the ground beating their chests. Children looked confused, unable to fully understand what had happened. For the people of Umudara, it felt as though the sky itself had fallen. But grief rarely stays pure for long. As evening approached, and groups of villagers gathered under different trees discussing the tragedy, small whispers began floating through the air, quiet at first, but dangerous. One elderly man leaned toward another and whispered, "Did you hear how he died?" They said it was sudden. The other replied. The first man frowned. Sudden deaths of strong men are rarely natural. Another man sitting nearby joined the conversation. Who was the last person with him before he died? Someone answered quickly. His wife. The men looked at each other. No one spoke for several seconds. Then one of them said something that would slowly begin spreading across the entire village. A man with wealth like that has many enemies, but sometimes the enemy sleeps inside the same house. That single sentence began the poison. By the next morning, whispers had grown louder. Groups of women gathered around the village while discussing the same troubling idea. How can a healthy man just collapse and die? I heard he was perfectly fine before leaving the house. Maybe someone wanted his property. Another woman lowered her voice carefully before speaking. You know they never had children. The others nodded slowly. That kind of thing can make a woman desperate. Soon, the whispers began turning into suspicions. And unfortunately, in the mind of the villagers, there was only one possible suspect, Amaka, the widow who had returned with the corpse of their beloved son. That same morning, Amaka sat quietly inside the house where her husband's body had been placed. The room was filled with relatives and mourners, but she felt completely alone. Her mind kept replaying memories of the last night she had seen him alive, his smile, his voice, the way he hugged her before leaving for his meeting. She placed her hand gently on her stomach again. A silent tear rolled down her cheek. "Nnamdi," she whispered softly. "You will never see your child." Outside the compound, however, the atmosphere had begun changing. The village elders had started holding a meeting. They sat beneath the giant Umudara tree in the center of the village square, their faces serious and thoughtful. These men were the highest authority in Umudara. Their words could decide the fate of anyone. The oldest elder, a tall man with gray hair and a deep voice, spoke first. "The death of Chief Nnamdi has brought great sorrow to our land," he said slowly. "But we must also ask the important questions." Another elder nodded. "A strong man does not just fall down and die like that." A third elder added quietly, "If we bury him without seeking the truth, the spirit of the dead may refuse to rest." The elders exchanged uneasy glances. In their tradition, sudden death was rarely accepted as natural. Someone had to be responsible. And soon, the name of the widow began appearing in their conversation. One elder cleared his throat. The wife was the last person with him. Another elder spoke carefully. And they never had children. Such situations often create bitterness. The oldest elder finally raised his hand, silencing everyone. "There is only one way to settle this matter," he said. His voice carried the weight of tradition. "We must ask the widow to prove her innocence before the ancestors." The other elders nodded slowly. They all knew what that meant. Ancient rituals, oaths before the shrine, public cleansing, the kind of trials that had been used for generations in Umudara to expose hidden crimes. That same evening, a messenger was sent to Chief Nnamdi's compound. His instructions were simple. The widow, Amaka Okoye, was to appear before the village elders the next morning. No explanation was given. But by the time the message reached her, rumors had already spread across the entire village. Some villagers stood outside the compound whispering. Some watched her with suspicious eyes. Some even began avoiding her completely. Amaka noticed the change immediately. Something was wrong. Something terrible was beginning to unfold. But she had no idea that the next morning would become the most humiliating day of her life. The day the entire village she once respected would stand before her, not with sympathy, but with accusations. And before the sun set the next day, her life would be destroyed.
She thought it was over. But what happened next will shock you.
The morning sun rose slowly above the palm trees of Umudara village. But on that day, the light of the sun did nothing to warm the cold tension that had settled over the community. Word had already spread through every corner of the village. The elders had summoned Amaka Okoye, the widow of the late Chief Nnamdi. No one said it openly, but almost everyone suspected what the meeting would be about. By the time the village bell rang 3 times, summoning the people to gather at the village square, a large crowd had already formed beneath the ancient Umudara tree. Men stood with folded arms. Women whispered quietly to each other. Even children climbed nearby trees just to watch what was about to happen. At the center of the gathering sat the council of elders, arranged in a semicircle on carved wooden stools. Their expressions were serious and unreadable. In front of them stood a small wooden table. On it rested several objects that made many villagers uneasy. A clay pot filled with water, a small knife, a calabash bowl, and beside them, a carved wooden idol representing the village shrine. The presence of those items meant only one thing: a ritual trial. Suddenly, the murmuring crowd fell silent. Amaka was approaching. She walked slowly toward the center of the square, escorted by 2 elderly women from her husband's family. Her eyes were red from days of crying. Her steps were slow and uncertain. But she carried herself with quiet dignity. The moment she reached the center of the gathering, the oldest elder stood up. His voice was deep and commanding. "Amaka Okoye," he began. "You stand before the people of Umudara today because the death of your husband has raised many questions." A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. Amaka lowered her head respectfully but said nothing. The elder continued. "Our son, Chief Nnamdi Okoye, was a strong man. A healthy man. A man loved by his people." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the crowd. "But such a man does not simply fall down and die without reason." Another elder leaned forward. "And in our tradition," he added firmly, "when death comes suddenly, the truth must be revealed." The crowd nodded in agreement. Amaka felt her heart pounding inside her chest. The first elder raised his hand toward the table holding the ritual objects. There are 3 sacred rites that will prove your innocence before the ancestors. He pointed to the clay pot. First, your head will be shaved clean to show humility before the spirits. He pointed to the calabash bowl. Second, you will drink the water used to wash the body of your late husband. A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. Then the elder pointed to the wooden idol beside the table. And finally, you will swear an oath before the shrine of our ancestors that you had no hand in his death. If you complete these 3 rites, the ancestors will judge your innocence. But if you refuse, the entire village will know that you hide the truth. Silence fell across the square. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on Amaka. For a long moment, she stood there trembling slightly. Her mind was spinning. She had expected questions, but she had not expected this. She slowly raised her head and looked at the elders. Then she spoke, her voice soft but clear. I did not kill my husband. The crowd stirred. I loved him with all my heart, she continued. But I cannot perform these rituals. The eldest elder frowned. What do you mean? Amaka took a deep breath. I am a Christian. She placed her hand gently against the Bible she had brought with her. My faith does not allow me to swear before idols or perform rituals before shrines. The reaction from the crowd was immediate. Gasps. Angry murmurs. Some villagers began shaking their heads in disbelief. One elderly woman shouted loudly from the crowd. Listen to her, she refuses to clear her name. Another man yelled angrily. Why would an innocent person refuse such a simple test? The elders exchanged dark glances. The oldest among them spoke again, this time with irritation in his voice. Woman, your husband was a son of this land. Our traditions are older than your church. Another elder added sternly, if you refuse these rites, the ancestors will assume you are guilty. Amaka felt tears gathering in her eyes. But she did not change her position. I respect this village, she said quietly, but I will not bow before idols. The crowd erupted into angry voices. Murderer. Witch. She killed him. Some women began throwing insults at her. The elders quickly raised their hands to restore order, but their faces had already hardened. The oldest elder stood up slowly. His voice carried across the entire square. Amaka Okoye, since you refused to prove your innocence before the ancestors, he paused for dramatic effect. This council declares that you are guilty in the eyes of the village. The crowd gasped loudly. And according to the traditions of Umudara, a woman who brings death upon her husband cannot remain among us. Amaka felt her knees weaken. The elder's final words fell like thunder. You are hereby banished from this village. The villagers erupted again. Some cheered. Some insulted her. Some simply watched silently. But no one defended her. Not one person. Not even members of her husband's extended family. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks. Slowly, she placed one hand over her stomach, still protecting the life growing inside her. A life that nobody in that village knew about. A life that belonged to the man they had just buried. But the villagers had already made their judgment. And by sunset that very day, Amaka Okoye would walk away from Umudara village. Alone, pregnant, rejected, humiliated, with nowhere to go. And the people who once praised her husband would never imagine that the child inside her womb would one day return and bring judgment upon them all.
If you think that's bad, just wait. You might want to sit down for this part.
The road out of Umudara was dusty, long, and endless. Amaka walked slowly, dragging a small bag with her few belongings. The villagers watched silently, some with sneers, others shaking their heads in disappointment. No one offered her food. No one offered help. The woman who had once been the wife of the village hero was now a castaway. But as she walked, she touched her stomach gently. 8 weeks. Her belly was still small, barely visible. Nobody knew she was carrying the son of Chief Nnamdi Okoye. She thought about the villagers, about the elders who judged her, about the rituals she refused to perform. They will never understand faith, she whispered. But God does. Amaka eventually arrived in a small town far from the village. She found a tiny, cramped room in a rundown building. The walls were cracked. The floor was uneven. But it was shelter. It was safety. Weeks turned into months. Her pregnancy progressed quietly. She survived by washing clothes for neighbors, cleaning houses, and occasionally selling vegetables at the market. Every night, she prayed for strength. When the child was finally born, she named him Chidubem. God is my guide." Holding him in her arms for the first time, Amaka whispered, "You are the son of the man they buried. But I will protect you. I will give you life." Life, however, was brutal. Raising a child alone in a world that had already judged her was a constant struggle. Chidubem grew up knowing poverty. He did not have toys like other children. His food was simple. He often watched other kids play while he helped his mother carry water or sweep the yard. But Amaka never allowed bitterness to touch his heart. She taught him the Bible. She taught him right from wrong. And every time he asked about his father, she told him the truth. Carefully, in measured words. "You were born from a man who loved his people," she said. "But your father's village betrayed me. One day, you will understand, Chidubem. One day, you will understand why the world can be cruel." By the time he was 10, Chidubem was quiet, serious, and observant. He noticed the way people reacted to his mother. He noticed the harsh words of neighbors, the looks of pity. He did not smile as much as other children. But Amaka knew that his mind was sharp, and she encouraged him to study. As he grew, Chidubem began to understand the injustice his mother had suffered. The words of the villagers, the unfair exile, the loss of her husband, all of it sank deeply into him. And yet, Amaka never let hatred consume him. "Revenge is not life, Chidubem," she would say. "Live, study, grow. One day, justice will find its way." Chidubem took those words to heart. But he also remembered the faces of the villagers who had humiliated his mother. By the time he turned 16, he had grown tall and strong. His eyes held a calm intensity that made even strangers uneasy. He excelled in school, eventually studying criminology and law enforcement at the university. He wanted to understand the systems of justice in the world to ensure that wrongs could be righted. But deep inside, a fire burned. A quiet, cold fire. The memory of his mother's exile and humiliation never left him. And the night his mother fell seriously ill, that fire became a plan. Amaka's hands were weak, her breathing shallow. She held Chidubem's hand in hers. "My son," she whispered, "do not let anger destroy your heart. Always trust God." Chidubem nodded silently, hiding the emotion swirling inside him. But in that silent moment, he made a decision. He would one day return to Umudara, not just to see the village, but to ensure that the people who had destroyed his mother's life felt the weight of justice. And when the day came, no law of man could stop him from completing what had begun 28 years ago.
Folktales brought you here, but joy will keep you listening. Subscribe now to my channel. Keep enjoying the episode from Tales by Nnamdi.
28 years had passed since Amaka had been exiled from Umudara. The dusty village roads, once bustling with the laughter of children, now seemed smaller. The trees swayed in the wind, and the same elders still sat beneath the Udala tree, their faces lined with age and pride. But nothing would prepare them for what was about to come. A black SUV rolled slowly into the village, its polished surface reflecting the harsh afternoon sun. Villagers paused their work, dropping baskets of yams and stopping conversations. From the car stepped a tall, commanding figure. His eyes were dark, calm, and cold. The kind of eyes that measured everything and revealed nothing. He walked slowly, deliberately, scanning the crowd. Chidubem, the boy born in exile, the son of Chief Amaka Okoye, had returned. Word of his arrival spread quickly. Within hours, the villagers gathered in the square. Murmurs filled the air. "Is that him? Could it really be the son of Nnamdi? He's grown." Chidubem did not speak to anyone. He only observed. Every face, every expression, every subtle gesture was noted. He knew them all. The men who had accused his mother, the elders who had exiled her, the villagers who had stood silently as injustice unfolded. And he remembered everything. The first night, Chidubem quietly entered the village without drawing attention. One by one, he began visiting the houses of the elders responsible for his mother's exile. A man who had led the accusation against Amaka was found dead the next morning, an apparent accident staged to look natural. Another, who had insulted her in public, disappeared, leaving only fear in his home. Rumors began spreading through Umudara like wildfire. "Something is happening," villagers whispered. "Chidubem's back," someone said. And something is wrong. Chidubem was meticulous. He did not attack indiscriminately. Each act was calculated. The man who had forced Amaka to drink the water from her husband's corpse found himself humiliated publicly before death. The elder who had demanded she shave her head and swear before the shrine disappeared without a trace. Villagers were terrified. Children hid inside houses. Families locked doors at night. But Chidubem never lost control. He never rushed. He wanted every person responsible to feel the weight of justice personally. Even the villagers who had remained silent. who had not actively hurt his mother but had allowed the injustice to happen, began to fear. Every household knew. The son of Chief Nnamdi had returned. Weeks passed. The village descended into chaos. Panic reigned in the streets. Finally, the surviving elders recognized the truth. "This is Nnamdi's son," one of them whispered fearfully. "The one they exiled his mother for." But by the time they confronted him, it was too late. Every person who had played a direct role in Amaka's humiliation had already been punished. The village was silent, haunted. Chidubem walked through the square one final time. His eyes scanned every corner, confirming the completion of his mission. He turned toward the small church built by his father years ago, now crumbling. He whispered softly, "Justice is done." But fate does not leave vengeance unchecked. The Nigeria police force had been tracking the deaths. Detectives pieced together the chain of events. Within hours, Chidubem was surrounded. There was no escape. He surrendered calmly. No struggle. No strides. Just a silent acknowledgement of the law. During interrogation, when asked why he had killed the villagers, he simply said, "They took my mother's life from her. They took her dignity. I only restored what was theirs by right." The police had no choice. Chidubem was sentenced to life imprisonment. Behind prison walls, Chidubem sat quietly. The villagers of Umudara whispered stories of him for years to come. Some feared him. Some regretted their actions. Some wept silently for the horrors they had caused. Chidubem's revenge had been complete, but the cost weighed heavily on his soul. Even though justice had been done, the cycle of pain had taken its toll. He closed his eyes, thinking of Amaka, of the life she had given him, and of the village that had never understood her faith, her courage, or her sacrifice. In that quiet moment, he finally realized the truth. Revenge may satisfy the heart, but it can never heal it. And outside the prison walls, life continued in Umudara, forever haunted by the son of the man who had once carried their village on his shoulders. Thank you for joining us on Tales by Nnamdi, where the voices of our ancestors speak through every story. I hope this tale has touched your heart, stirred your imagination, and carried you into the world of our people. Remember, like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss another journey into the wonders of folklore. Until next time, let the stories guide your soul and awaken the spirit within.